created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality algorithm. And
I think you will have a whole levels of robotics, that humanoid robots or non-humanoid robots, whatever the case is.
But the one that I really gravitated towards was Alteryx. Low code, no code, business intelligence stuff, data science, machine learning, things like that. Audio,
the text, and then there's big metaverse buzz. Everybody knows the metaverse.
Another week of AI.
Yeah, that's one of the ways you do actually, help the next generation to think of the way you need to think, by writing a certification, and that certification promotes these sort of questions that they might not ask themselves all the time, but they have to study for it. And if they study for it, they have to know this somewhere in the back of their head to say, not that guy. Don't give it to the North Koreans, give it to the South Koreans. There's a difference. Right? Because, we were laughing about this, but here, the Google just told us the other day that North Koreans are using Gemini to write new resumes and submitting job application in USA.
Absolutely.
Right? So we need to know, HR, are you paying attention to who it is that you're doing a Zoom call with? And where are they located at? Do you know, at least technicality-wise, they can use deepfake to use accent that is literally from Florida or something like that, and they're interviewing from North Korea, like literally, right? So we gotta know this information. We gotta have this information in the back of our head, because it's not every day you're interviewing a North Korean from Zoom call with Florida accent, So I just say all those out loud because, look, me and Tony, when we sat down in the room and we were brainstorming about what to ask, questioning is the hardest part of learning. How do I get to a point of learning that I can just ask question and feel comfortable about asking that question? But it starts with asking the dumb questions first, literally, right? If you think it's a dumb question, go ahead and ask it. Then you'll find out, wait, it wasn't so dumb, really, right? And then
not only that, but you'll find out how good your mentors are, because if they take your dumb question and they treat it seriously and they treat it with respect.
That's right.
Then they're also telling you that you have value in not only in the question, but the fact you thought of it.
Ask that next question. Yeah.
And not only that, but to Tony's point, ask the dumb question, because the person next to you, your left and your right, they may be wondering the same thing, but no one ever really stepped up. So then it becomes another training and learning opportunity based on the question.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the things that we do in the military courses, right? There's a dumb question, but we'll answer it anyway, right?
Right.
But it raises that community awareness that we can ask questions here. This is a safe space for me to ask that question. And if I ask that question, I help somebody else out, because now they say, you know what, I got a better question than that. And we don't know what question will ultimately lead us to just change everything, right? Because it happens quite frequently. Because if you feel comfortable about anything, you should be able to ask questions about it, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean everybody is comfortable enough to ask those questions. So if you feel uncomfortable in this space where you're thinking like, I'm new, I'm not so sure what I'm getting into, ask questions. I think that's going to change dramatically based on every learning you have. If you are able to ask those questions, now you can indicate what it is that you don't know and what it is that you have to learn on top of that. So Tony is a good example of question banks.
Yeah, one thing that I like to ask when I find myself in situations where I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, that gives me permission to engage in dialogue is, okay, what should I be asking that I don't know to ask?
Right. Yeah. Help me with the question, please.
The other thing I always keep in mind when I'm either asking or answering questions is everybody that I interact with, I either started out the same place, or at some point they're going to go beyond me and I'm going to have to be the one that is now trying to follow their lead. So I use that to try to keep myself a little bit humble. I didn't start out knowing all this. I had to ask a ton of questions, as Asif will attest. I had to ask a ton of questions to get here.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that at some point in time, I'm going to run into somebody, and I always hope I do, and I feel comfortable here because I don't feel like I'm the smartest person in the room. I don't want to ever be the smartest person in the room, because if I can be in a room with people that are more intelligent than I am, then I have an opportunity to learn. And I mean, I've been learning all night from you four, so I know I'm in good company.
Well, I think one of the things that makes Tony very unique is questioning your question. He's helping you improve your questioning capability, saying, why are you asking that question? How did you come to that question? And what are you expected to get out of that question, right? This is something that an end user's mentality shift means, right? Like, so let me give you an example. If an end user sees a blue link, they know they're not supposed to click on that blue link because they've been trained on cybersecurity. That's it. Why aren't you clicking on that blue link? How will you know the difference between all the blue links, right? And what will come out of that blue link, right? What is the process once you click on that blue link to say, what happens next, right? Can you describe that? Can you ask that question with this where, when, what, all these things that comes with it? Probe a little bit deeper, right? But now here's the one thing that I always say is that you always have a Model T curve in learning, right? Everything goes flat, all of a sudden you go deep. So some guys knows a lot about cybersecurity, ethical hacking, and that blue link that you're not supposed to click on, right? But if you can at least ask the right question, you don't have to go deep, but you can go deep enough to say, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Right? That's too deep for me. That's how you know you're getting comfortable with learning, right? Because you learned a lot, but you cannot be learning everything. So I kind of want to, hit on my subject matter expertise here, because questioning, the reason I love Tony, this much, that, when I first met him, I just was blown away by how his brain thinks, is because in machine learning, one thing that I cannot stop teaching people is about their questioning methods. This questioning methods is not just important, it saves time and it saves tons of pain. If you can ask the right question at the right moment using the right data set, your machine learning journey becomes, instead of 6 months, 6 days. 6 days. If you can ask the questions even better, your machine learning journey, it could be becoming a 6-hour one. And let me explain 6 hours and 6 days and 6 months. You rather ask the question and find out there's no point of asking that question in machine learning. You just say 6 hours later, I'm going to reframe that question. And if you want to develop a machine learning tool in 6 days, which is artificial intelligence, machine learning, that's the core of artificial intelligence, you can have machine learning in 6 days because you asked the wrong question in the first hour, but you caught it early enough to say, that was a wrong question to ask. In hour 6, I was able to change that question and say, now the question I asked, now it allowed me to deliver a machine learning, the output in 6 days because you asked the right question. And you had the courage to ask the right question no matter what other people thought. Mm-hmm. And these are sort of the power of questioning the right way and the right methods, right? So when Brian teaches somebody about CompTIA certifications on security or network, you're thinking to yourself, like, wait a second, I have this great machine learning use case, but because I asked some questions about networking, all of a sudden I know that would never work. Because the routers and switches are not made for the machine learning situations output that I'm looking for. It's just simple as that, right? And you can think about like Masako, right? Masako is transforming people's lives to jobs. If you have a machine learning use case that you're thinking like, you know what, there's no job behind it. Why am I learning about that machine learning? Why don't I do something that will earn me some income and give me a potential pay raise? Question, right? Question in multiple fronts. Hardware, software, data, do they all fit? Right? Machine learning. It's like what's the life cycle of my machine learning? What is the endpoint of my machine learning, right? What do I want out of this AI? So all these things comes down to questioning. And I think I wanted to have Tony in this conversation for a very long time, just to get this sort of conversation going about people that are just not even asking questions. They're sort of like just amazed by things.
And to further your point, my friend, one of the things that I give presentations on nationally to folks in the 911 industry is how to ask questions of your data. It's not just enough to say, I want to know what the average processing time was for our calls in April of 2025. Why do you want to know? What is it that you're actually looking for? When I get any data request, I have what I jokingly call in all my talks a Spice Girls moment. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. And we pay 20 questions. Because to your point, that 30 minutes that I spend interrogating you as to what it is you're actually looking for becomes 6 hours I save on the back end getting it to you. Because now I don't have to spend all that time figuring it out. And I had a presentation in April in Ashland, Virginia. Somebody said, well, how do you get started? So I, as a thought experiment, started with one question. And I tracked that one question to all the different places you could go with it. Didn't require AI, didn't require machine learning. We came out with 52 questions from one question. And each one of them was a different nuance, a different depth, but it told them so much more about what was going on in their center and how things have evolved, how things had changed. And when we started actually getting in toward questions that could be useful for AI, then we also had a whole bunch of questions you could ask your AI vendor or your AI developer on what is it going to do? How are you using my data? Are you using my data to retrain the model? Where is it going to go? How do you work with it? How do you take care of it? How do I measure what your output is against my success, what I define as success? How do we define success? I've seen people deploy an AI, and I'm not going to throw a center under the bus, that deployed an AI translation program, and they had to remove it after a week because it had not been trained on the emergency lingo that we needed. Now, that company went back and they've reworked their models, and they've gotten cooperation from centers who've donated data that they separate off so they can train this model separately, and it's much better. But those are the questions that we start asking. And it's the questions that I ask whenever a vendor says, hey, we want to introduce AI in your center in this way. What's it going to do for me? How are you handling my data? Are you requiring us to use our data for your training purposes? And how do we measure success?
All right, guys. I know you guys have probably a lot of questions, so let's grill Tony here. But I do want to ask a question to Tony about those 52 questions. That reminds me of feature extraction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at a big data set and you do a feature extraction. So when we think about feature extraction from a data set, that's 52 questions, right? You start with one question, you end up with 52 questions because you're looking at the data set and you're saying, there's so many features here. This is not just name, last name, first name, and phone numbers. This is last name, first name, and the events of your life which changed you. What did you become after that event? I'm just going on about the 53rd question, right? Like, oh, what happens to a person after they get in a car accident? How does that life transform? How do I find that out, right? But I'm just putting that out as an example. But tell us some, data set related things that you've seen where you're just like, I started here, but boy, we ended up in some other places. Like, what's your take on that?
Oh, the easiest one of the bunch, because I'm actually working it up as a possible presentation for a conference next year. When we work on calls, in a lot of cases, when an officer's done with a call, they need to go back to it later and they'll want to put time against the call for their reports. A lot of us have procedures, but one of the things that we try not to do is reopen a closed call. but it's the fastest thing to do. So what we found out was, how much did that impact us? Well, we found it impacted us in two ways. One, it could make us look incredibly good, because sometimes we were showing that we closed the call 3 days before it actually arrived, because it was when it got reopened. But at the other end, it sometimes created situations where it looked like we had a call sitting waiting for over a year before it was assigned again, because it got reopened for whatever reason to put time against it. And now we had a problem. And we had elapsed times, and those elapsed times, either in the negative or in the positive, in the outlier realms, really impacted what it looked like to the community and how we service the community, because the folks that were aggregating the data and publishing it to the community weren't taking those nuances into consideration. So I had to sit down and rework some of that so that we could say, no, we don't have calls that are sitting for a month at a time. We have calls that were only open for an hour and a half, but then it got opened a month later because somebody had to go back and record the time against it.
So if
we have to look at that.
As comfortable in
I have a question. This is a two-part question, Tony, and this has to do with previously you mentioned how it's extremely important to you to turn the data into information that is useful to you, and you're very passionate about it. I feel it when you shared it. So what has been one of your highest points of data that you turned into information, how it served the greatest purpose for you? And then what has been one of your lowest points that it didn't turn out the way you anticipated that it would?
The highest point was my master's thesis, my master's capstone project, actually. We analyzed the Emergency Communications Center's response to COVID-19, starting with locking people into the center for 2 weeks at a time, to sending everybody home, to renting an entire floor of a hotel so that we could keep our operations rolling, but protect our telecommunicators at the same time. And what we found was something as simple as changing our VPN provider made an incredibly impactful difference to the positive in how quickly we responded to events in the community. Probably the lowest was the congressional shooting in Alexandria a few years ago. I got called into the investigation because I'm the guardian of the data, and it happened in our jurisdiction. And as we went through, we looked at so many different calls. We kind of felt like we missed a red flag. We missed something because we didn't put the data into information fast enough, the right data into information fast enough, and we saw it after the fact. And regardless of your political output, the fact that someone was shot and harmed, thankfully not killed, but shot and harmed because because too many fractured systems did not come together to put the data into meaningful information fast enough, somebody got harmed. And that drives me to what can I do? What can we do with this data? What can we change? How can we change how we use it so that we can save a life, so that we can get to somebody a little faster? The American Heart Association will tell you that if you can put your hands on chest within seconds of somebody showing symptoms of a cardiac arrest, you can raise their survival rate to 90%. How fast can we recognize it and get those hands on chest to save that next life? How quickly can we get to a scene of a domestic to prevent something bad from happening, because we can recognize a keyword or a stress point, or we can recognize something that rolls us that 2 seconds faster, because that 2 seconds might make a difference. And if we can save a life, if we can protect a life, then every second that we work is worth what we do.
Thanks for that. I have another question, and you may be able to answer this, or you may not. But when we were talking earlier about 911, the 911 center, my mind always goes back to 911, the day. And listening to you right now talk about high points and low points, and the capacity of receiving data, sharing data, and then getting it disseminated to the right sources and resources to do what is appropriate to save time and save lives. When it comes to 911, the day, and the misappropriation of data, what are your thoughts, if you have any thoughts with regard to that, around the information that was released or the information that was shared that wasn't disseminated across agencies? What are your thoughts? Being a data scientist, when it comes to data and information, what are your thoughts around 911, the day?
We don't use nearly enough of it. We generate tons of it. And we barely scratch the surface of what we can do with it. Like I said, one of my goals is to use it to identify problems in the community that we can address before the phone's ever picked up and called. If we can cut down those calls before anybody picks up the phone, that's a win. Because that's maybe somebody doesn't have that bad day. Maybe that telecommunicator doesn't get that crying, hysterical parent on the phone because their child is in danger. If I can cut that down, if I can find new and inventive ways to use that data to make it better for my telecommunicators, if I can find a way to say, hey, this person has taken so many calls in this time, and these calls have all been fairly long, can we get them off the floor on a break now and find a way to to manage that so that we don't have a burnout situation, so that I don't have a telecommunicator to walk off shift silent and I don't know if they're okay or not? I want to make sure they go home okay. I want to find every possible way I can torture the data until it confesses, so that I can make things better for the people in the headsets and the people they're serving in the community. And we don't use as much of it as we can. So I'm passionate about, can we find new ways? And somebody says, well, hey, can we look at this? I'll stop and look at it, and we'll come up and see what it tells us. What can we find? You can ask the question. I'm going to help you find the data, and we're going to find an answer.
What are some of the ways that you believe we can create change within our communities to, share information, whether it's
look at the types of calls we're getting. Look at the types of calls we're getting, where we're getting them, and when we're getting them. For example, do we see a situation where one county over from me is a food desert? There are no active grocery stores in the county. You have to leave the county to go buy fresh groceries one county over either direction. So let's look at their medical calls. Do we see areas that the farther you are from the grocery store, from fresh food by distance, do we see an increase in medical emergency calls? Could those be addressed by putting together, instead of putting together farmers markets once a month in a community, could we put together, pick up some of that produce that farmers that are trying to get rid of, purchase it, and then distribute it out into the community, into communities at risk? We know that certain communities have health issues that are found in a greater propensity in a community. Whether it's a Native American community, an African American community, a Latino community, it doesn't matter. There's different health issues that are more prevalent in a community. If we know that we have those communities in our midst, how can we work with our partners in public and private sector to address those in a way that don't become 911 calls? If we can take our community before they call 911, then we have a happier, healthier community, and we have a better community. We have a stronger community.
I like.
And we can use our data as a starting point because we can see the problem. Now, if we can take the problem to people who can help us devise a solution, and we can put the solution out there that can benefit all of us and make us all stronger, make us all wiser, make us all healthier, make us all safer, and we at the same time we reduce the number of calls coming in 911, how can we go wrong?
It goes back to that question I always say, what can we build together today?
That's
Right.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. I like that. I hope to work together soon.
I hope so. I think it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Tony? Because I think we're coming to an end here. But if you have any questions, this is your chance. You don't get to meet a CAD data scientist. But I got to tell you one thing about the models that Tony was describing, right? It's a model. You create those bar graphs and you figure out the anomalies like 9/11, right? There's outliers that happens, but guess what? An anomaly and outlier is they're the biggest teacher of everything else, right? So when you look at a bar graph and you see like, oh, average, boom, there's an outlier over there. Well, that outlier teaches you a lot about averages if you knew how to ask the question, turn it around, right? The famous joke is that all models are wrong, some are useful. All models are wrong, some are useful.
That is
that's
true.
where Tony comes in, right? All models can be wrong as long as you can make it useful. The reason AI is so exciting is because it's delivered. People that don't find AI exciting, and again, I'm just kind of jokingly saying that, is that they have to clean up those data in order for this AI to work. Tony mentioned the canary in coal mine. Well, as a data ETL guys, we are the one that works in a coal mine all the time. We have to work in spaces that nobody wants to even get there. But guess where all the AI originates from? From those database where the data lives, and those data outliers and anomalies and models that is developed over time, they prove themselves to be worthy enough of something. All of a sudden you do design, you develop, and you develop more, you develop again, you develop and you fail, and then you develop again, and then all of a sudden you deploy. But people think it's just design, develop, and deploy. No. By the time you deployed, you already lost many things. You have to shred many of these data sets. So it's a difficult journey, but that's why it's so important. That's why everybody loves it today, because the chances of succeeding with your model that is useless, it's a little bit better today than it was yesterday, right? Because now you're seeing multiple other models. You're able to bring those models together and make things happen. Make things happen, like Tony just said. You're shaving off 1 or 2 seconds in response. That 1 or 2 seconds save lives, right? That 1 or 2 seconds of latency that you experience in a system could mean a whole lot of different things, So this is the type of conversation me and Tony had, and like I said, my brain always was like, "What are you talking about?" Because I love it. These are the things that you don't necessarily say from financial reports. You're not looking at this from perspective of a manufacturing shop floor that wants to save 1 or 2 seconds in their manufacturing, because that's the type of stuff that I deal with most of the time. And then all of a sudden you hear Tony, he's talking about 1 or 2 seconds to save somebody's lives using EMT services. You're like, wait, what? That's amazing type of satisfaction that comes from the data and data analytics. So really, I want to thank all of you guys for joining this conversation. I get fascinated every time because we learn something new every time, right? And we learn it from each other. So our Smart AI community, we are for the specialist. That's the S in SMART, right? M for methods, A for advocacy, R and T for research and training. So we are all specialists here. We all have our methods, and we all advocate. But we advocate through research and training because we have to continuously research and train. And when we do that over and over, we learn different things. As a specialist, you can ask me about many things, and I probably know some things about those little things, So whatever the case is, as a specialist, when we come to the table and we sit around with each other in a community of practice, as you can see right here, we come frequently enough, we learn more frequently, and we keep up to date. We learn more frequently. We're able to keep up with the ever-changing AI world. I blame it on NVIDIA because they does so many fascinating things every week that I'm just like, it's hard to keep up with. These hardwares are out of control, how innovative they are. And of course, with software that is being developed so rapidly and the data that is being produced so rapidly, it's really hard to keep up with AI guys, right? So as an advocate, I advocate for the fact that we all need to be educated, and we all need to educate with each other. Look to your left, look to your right, and see who knows what, and address that as your source of strength, right? So again, I had a blast learning, but let's go around the room and give our departing thoughts, and give a little shout out to everybody who's listening, and what it is that you would like them to have as a call to action, so that way maybe they will do something different tomorrow after listening to you. I'll let Tony go first.
The one thing I'd say is support is if you live, especially in a rural community, and you have the skills to help technologically with your centers, reach out to them and see if there's something you can do to help. In some cases, they may say no, but they may say, hey, if you can help us write reports and show us something, whatever, and you're willing to go through and work with a pre-cleaned data set or whatever, find out what you can do to help. Find out what you can do to help them. And make sure that one other thing you can do, talk to your congressperson, because right now 911 telecommunicators are still classified as secretarial. They're not classified as first responders. They need to be, because they are the ultimate first responder. When you pick up that phone and you dial 911, they're the first voice you hear. They're not secretarial. They're first responders. They're the first responders. And we need to make sure they're treated that way. So one other thing to take away, reach out to your representatives, your senators, and tell them we need to change this. That 911 telecommunicators have to be first responders. We cannot keep calling them. In some states, they're recognized that way, but we need them federally recognized as first responders, not secretarial.
Awesome. Brian, any call to action?
I would just say for those that are watching all around on this podcast, is I live and breathe by the 3Ds. You don't have to be an expert in everything that we're talking about. You may not even have a clue on what we're talking about, but just be determined, be dedicated, and be disciplined to the cause, whatever your cause is, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's the DoD, no matter what it is, have the 3Ds: determination, dedication, and be disciplined.
Darcy?
I just want to say thank you for letting me participate with such extraordinary people. And the call to action I have for our listeners are we've covered a bit to ask those questions and have the courage to ask those questions, and know that you don't have to be the expert in everything. And when you ask those questions, the experts show up. It's shocking and surprising and fantastic. So there is a community out there, and we're all making mistakes. We're all learning, and we're all doing this together.
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Darcy, for being here. Really appreciate you. Masako, your turn.
All right. A secure world is not built by tech alone. It's built by intention.
Oh, yeah.
I believe we can. I believe we must. Because people are not optional in systems. People are the system.
Vote for Masako.
Yeah. And you can find me on masakome.com and Mommy to Be in Me.
Absolutely. And all of us here are just
in the smart community, smart AI,
that's right.
smart technology services, Coupa solutions.
No, all of us are here to support and help. So anyways, you feel like you need expertise from this group, just reach out to us and we'll get you in contact because we all have all their contact information. But we'll first ask, hey, would you like to reach out?
Right, but what do we say, y'all? What do we say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with the team.
Go with the team. That's right. That's right. Well, I feel energized. I don't know about you guys. So, AI is out.
Yes.
Until next time. That's it. That's it. That's how you do it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Created my own little algorithms to do one thing or another, like disease states, a mortality